Okay, we're good.
Yeah,
Looks like we're live. Looks like we're live on Twitter, YouTube. We got to get LinkedIn figured out and Facebook. So we get to start firing it up.
All right.
Cool, man. So look, this is what you're looking at right now. I wanted to talk a little bit about the correlation right now, between equities and Bitcoin, but it's been a relatively uneventful week, or at least it started as an uneventful week, I think, which now turned into a extremely eventful week with crypto and with the markets. But we talked about it a lot, where a lot of people have been watching the correlation between cryptocurrency, equities last couple of months. There's a narrative that cryptocurrency, and specifically Bitcoin, is a risk-off asset, meaning in times of uncertainty, when investors attempt to reduce risk, they're looking at bonds, they're trying to find, moving to cash, and that crypto potentially could have been kind of a safe haven for that. But I think we've seen the exact opposite. And so, what you're looking at is I believe a year to date on, let me just make sure it's year to date. Here's the year to date on, BTC and the S&P 500. So you can see kind of late February, this kind of huge drop off that happens, looking pretty correlated, I would say. And then, more recently, I think some in that kind of middle portion there, there were some times where it seemed like potentially they were getting a little bit more disconnected, but, looking at the 5-day specifically right here, which is about 2 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, was when the FOMC had they released their minutes and everything about, basically interest rates zero forever, or at least indefinitely. So they said, the exact quote was, "The committee expects to maintain this target range until it is confident that the economy has weathered recent events and is on track to achieve its maximum employment and price stability goals," which means basically forever, indefinite amount of cheap money. So the S&P moves up very quickly right after that, and it even looks like a small blip based on what happened after. But Bitcoin actually reacted in the same way, and some of the kind of large cap alts reacted, very similarly, like an XRP and a Litecoin. But the rest of the market was kind of, the alts at least, were unaffected by this. Now, a completely different story. To add this on top of yesterday, which yesterday reminded me a lot of those beginning days of COVID, when shit was hitting the fan, and it was, very, very correlated, because, you saw that huge drop off when the market kind of took a dive, but it was really starts to kind of leak downwards, with the futures market, and then bam, everything kind of falls off towards the end. So very kind of interesting there. And it's, there are 10 to 15% losses when the S&P was off at the very bottom, and then it kind of recovers. Like that drop here in Bitcoin, which was kind of all the way down. So I don't know, looking very correlated, I would say. But I think that the thing is that I was kind of thinking about, and I wrote it down here, which was like, I think that the S&P and Bitcoin are highly correlated, and then the alts are somewhat correlated to Bitcoin. So I'm not thinking that like the entire crypto market is correlated, but I'm thinking that some of the alts are correlated more to Bitcoin's movement, and Bitcoin is being correlated to the S&P, which kind of, I think, creates like a little bit of a looseness around, creates just a looseness around how there can be a little bit more movement. So, we were kind of talking, I was like, so where do you find alpha? And there are some people that have found some serious alpha in 2020, and we'll look at, this is on LunarCRUSH, this is a 3-month Kyber Network chart, which is pretty amazing. We're looking at social contributors. So for those of you out there that don't know, social contributors is the unique amount of voices across places like Twitter and Reddit. So how many people individually are talking about Kyber on any given moment? So we kind of collect that data. So we're looking at the growth of the voices across time. And so, Kyber did, 178% in the last 3 months. And you're looking at like almost the low was when, COVID was just kind of getting started. So it kind of stayed resilient through that. And then started to kind of move up, and you've seen 178%, which is amazing. And then Digibyte, and I know you want to talk about them a little bit, but basically undeterred. I think the 6 month is even crazier.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting things, because when you talk about like contributors, I mean, that's one of our newer metrics. And, we were able to go backwards on that one as well, because we've collected every user posting about crypto for the past, 18, 24 months. And one thing stands out to me, and that's, I got it up on my screen here, but if you look at Bitcoin.
Yeah, you're up.
Yeah, and if you look at Bitcoin, you go back to here to like March 20th, when you first saw this chart, you might have thought, oh, that's when the halving occurred. And the halving actually occurred here, and on May 11th in this zone here, and then we've kind of tapered off with the individuals posting. And if I were to zoom in to a shorter time period, you'd see that we're actually starting to pick up just a little bit the last few days. But what do you think this was right here on March 20th?
So this is contributors. This
social contributors. So this is on March 20th. There was 297,391 individual user accounts.
Post, wasn't it?
What's that?
Was it? But that wasn't like an Elon post, was it?
That wasn't Elon. It was Cash App. It was Cash App, and Cash App mentioned Bitcoin, and we tracked that, and it wasn't so much that they got a mention. I mean, sure, there was one mention in one post, and there was actually a couple posts that they did, but it's interesting when people have the topic of, oh, we need mainstream adoption in crypto, and you look at the fact that spike right there, that's the largest spike that Bitcoin has had since we've tracked. And it shows the power of Cash App. It shows the power of mainstream applications. It shows how important and just like a mind-blowing user experience is. It's such a great app. But I find that interesting when you look at that. And I probably have another example of this here. When we look at, let's look at social engagement on Ethereum. And it was right here, was on around this time here on May 17th, that was J.K. Rowling. And so J.K. Rowling drove, like, that's actually another high for a year, the most engagement on Ethereum. So, and a lot of people would say, and we actually did some posts on this saying, hey, J.K. Rowling's the most influential for Ethereum today. And everyone's like, no, she's not, no way. She's not an expert at Ethereum. We're experts at Ethereum. How dare she join our top list of influencers? And the reality is, if you look at it, she got the most people to talk about Ethereum. She has such a huge following, and you broadened the base of who's actually even knowing what Ethereum is. And so she's getting people to investigate, what is this thing? What's going on? What does it do? What's a smart contract? What are these projects built on it? So when we talk about, mainstream adoption, I find it real interesting when you look at these kind of larger accounts. And we've seen it on some other ones as well, by the way, some other people that may not be considered crypto experts that drive just a huge broadened amount of awareness that the community needs. And, it's an interesting element of what we're looking at now that just to bring up, because you mentioned contributors, because I think it's an important piece to broaden out.
Yeah, and I know we were having some discussions yesterday with some folks on Twitter about, contributors in 2017 and spam and everything else. But it's, the pure number of wallet growth, that we've seen across most of the larger coins has been pretty insane. And to see now that the conversation is catching up with that, I think is great. And it's not just across Bitcoin or Ethereum. I think it's across the whole network. So it's pretty cool. So I wanted to go back and just look at one more that we've kind of been looking at as far as, people looking out there for alpha and looking, that, the narrative that it's not there's a lot of places to find alpha that, you know, are not correlated with what else is going out there. And like Zilliqa was one of them. And, you know, looking at kind of these huge spikes in contributors. And I know they had some feature announcements that have come out in the last couple of months, but it's really cool to see, you know, new projects kind of coming online and, you know, now building out some cool features. I know they had like a social pay, I think was one of them, but it's really cool because it's like, sure, you know, there's a little bit of like a pullback here kind of mid-February and then a little drop off when things started to kind of, you know, potentially get, you know, bad with the pandemic. But, you know, the growth and out of this has not had kind of the up and down that you were seeing, you know, with something like this, you know, year to date. And so it does kind of make me think a little bit that, you know, there's definitely more institutional money in Bitcoin than there is across like all the other alts. And so, you know, if you're a retail investor and you're out there and you're saying like, hey, I'm just plowing money into Bitcoin, that's all I'm doing. You know, it's great. And it's like, love to have you part of the community, but, you know, you're kind of exposed, you know, you're not exposing, but, you know, if you're looking for that hedge, you know, at least in the times of kind of uncertainty like this, it might not be it. Now it might outperform greatly in times where things are a little bit more stable or, you know, some big news comes out or anything. But at the end of the day, like Bitcoin is been the same since basically being, obviously there's been a lot of upgrades to the network. It's awesome, but it's been basically around the same, it's the same tech. No, Bitcoin's the same thing that it was. Like, you know, it's more of like a, you know, it's a hedge against kind of like the systemic sovereign fiat, you know, everything else. But at the same time, it's reacting very similarly to some of these other markets. And so it's just an interesting, you know, piece to look at, you know, when you're out there looking, and there's a lot of really cool projects that you could probably find.
So even listening to you right now, it's interesting. Like you mentioned Zilliqa and then Bitcoin, and like Bitcoin is this kind of macro indicator. You're not going to compare Zilliqa against the Dow Jones. But you are comparing Zilliqa against the Dow Jones or the S&P. I'm sorry, Bitcoin against the S&P or the Dow Jones, and it's like it's this sort of macro level like health indicator if you think about it. And Zilliqa is like a, you know, or all these alts really are like these startups that are trying to gain traction, and traction in the altcoin space looks a tad different than what you might consider a traditional startup like ourselves.
Right.
And it's fascinating when you look at what they're doing, where, I mean, you could pull up their chart and just see, you know, look at social volume over the last few months. Look at that. Where'd you get those cool glasses? I love it. If you look at what's gone on the last few months, like, you know, charting aside, what exactly is happening? They're building applications that stoke the engagement and volume of their project. And so like they launched social pay, for example, and that went crazy. I mean, it was actually the highest on the charts. If you pull up their chart, I mean, they launched a few rounds of testing this thing like alpha, in an alpha scenario where they're like, hey, I think you used hashtag Zilliqa, and then you got paid, they tipped you out. And then they did another thing with like COVID-19, and it was this tracking thing, and then it like tipped, and it drove a lot of eyeballs on their project. Also at a time when the project itself is just accelerating, they're doing a lot of stuff. And so what's happened is we've seen it. I mean, we ended up with picking it up almost 3 or 4 times before the price ever rose. So that entire chart if you go back on our social posts, we noticed it just based on our signals way back, like hundreds of percents ago. And it was solely due to the fact that they were busy building their community. But it's fascinating when you take their community building alongside their technology that they're building and you blend them together, you have a successful altcoin. It's a very successful project. And it's interesting because a lot of the altcoins, they seem to hire influencers to pump it while their technology is not really advancing, and they're not blending the two. And so really that is the formula. Get your tech rolling. It's not coming soon. Get it out, get the community talking about it, and you'll have a lot of success. It's a pretty simple formula. It's very hard to do.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the alt rank score out 6 months, and you know, you can see it's kind of has a, you know, a pattern towards alt rank. Number one is the best. If you're the top alt rank, it means that you've got good social volume. You're beating Bitcoin when it comes to price, good market volume. So kind of like our health check on a project, and you can see, you know, it got down to like number four a couple times, and then it wasn't until, you know, number 3 here, but now you can see consistently it's popping into that top 10. And then, you know, it was even as it was starting to rise at the bottom of the wedge here, you could see it was really, you know, this is May 30th that, you know, it's really kind of punched through. So yeah, like you're saying, combination of good social and contributors that are coming in. Looks really good.
Yeah, and I mean,
what else did you want to show?
I think, you know, we could talk about today. We got Theta token, which is our coin of the day. And what the reason it's coin of the day, well, let me start with, it can't be coin of the day more than 1 time per month. It has to have really solid metrics between market activity and social activity. So it's sort of a blended view at it. And it becomes coin of the day. And what that means is people, they can come to LunarCRUSH.com. They can access all of the social metrics. So if they see all these social metrics in here, they're all unlocked. They don't need an account. It's completely free. All the time frames are unlocked, so you can go back and see it for like 3 months, for example, see how it's doing. And you can see the Galaxy score in real time, the alt rank in real time, and our feed of everything, and all the influencers. I'll comment on those influencers just because we just did a post for Follow Friday about that one. So like, I'll take the 1 week. So if you think of all of the posts that we collect, they come from users. And for starters, we weed out those users and remove spam. So we take all the spammers out, the bots. We're pretty accurate at that at this point. And we're left with the individuals that are talking about a coin the most. So Crypto Wizard here, who's our top influencer over the last week, the reason he's the most influential is because he has the most engagement on his posts that are about Theta. He's done the most activity, so he's posted multiple times, and he has quite a popular account. So as you can see, he has 10,916 followers, only following 393, fair amount of engagement, fair amount of posts, and he has 9 posts about Theta. And so we track this in real time. What's really cool is you can go back and say over the last year, these are the most influential accounts based upon, again, engagement, activity, and popularity. So this is a real-time thing. This is a pretty big step out away from a lot of the influentialists that you've seen before from different publications. A lot of those are survey-based, or they're actually pretty subjective, a lot of them, or they'll look at some metrics like who has the most followers, or you know, and it's got to be blended. And it's got to be real time. By the time you've published something, it's outdated. And so what we're after here is like kind of capturing the pulse of the community and seeing who is really like driving the markets. I mean, I'll give you an example. We've talked to lots of projects that actually hire a lot of influencers. And when we've looked at those projects on our own site, we've noticed that those influencers aren't even influential over those coins at any period of time. So it's a really nice way for projects to find who they should be partnering with, who's driving engagement on their projects and adoption. So it's a pretty useful tool that we built out here.
Click into the actual like detail page, so we can see what else.
Let's look at Satoshi Flipper. So Satoshi Flipper, here's his profile. He comes up a lot, and you can see he's busy. I mean, this is hard work. Being an influencer might look like glamorous to the outside, but it's a lot of work. I mean, you could see they're posting 33 posts on Wednesday of this week. He posts 33 posts that relate to all of these coins. We got Bitcoin, we got Stellar, we got Chainlink, Zilliqa, Cardano. and on and on. And, you know, to post 33 times a day, and these aren't really spam posts. I mean, you can see we list them all down here. This is some serious work. This is like, you're waking up in the morning and you're posting all day and you keep posting. And, you know, this is spam excluded, and he's not a spammer. There's a lot, this is super valuable account. And it's just fascinating when you think of how much effort needs to go into every single tweet to become super influential. And, you know, we've got, if I just back up and look at, in general, not related to any coin specifically, but just across the entire market, that query took a little bit because it's a whole year of everyone. I mean, Cointelegraph is pretty crazy. And there you go again, J.K. Rowling.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Right? You would never think that in a million years, that J.K. Rowling is above Justin Sun. And that is objective.
She didn't even start posting till like a couple of weeks ago. And this was a year of data. So like Cointelegraph, like if you want to talk about consistency, I mean, across all of the channels and the quantity of data, I mean, they're kind of like the top spot. Like they are out there posting a shit ton. And so they've been like cemented into that spot. And so, but for J.K. Rowling to just come on board and just almost break into that spot in like a couple of weeks, just like you said, mainstream, right? Like talking to everyone.
It's not so much like, if you just look, I mean, like 15 million almost followers.
But it wasn't just the following. It was the quantity of engagement on each of those posts that was really what went crazy.
And I think some people may remember like a post or two of hers. She's actually done all of these. And so it's almost I don't want to call it planned, but no one posts this many posts on accident.
Maybe she just went long and then she's like, let's do this.
She's like, wait a minute, I can move the market. No, I'm not getting in for that. But like, it is interesting because like even looking at Cointelegraph, I mean, they look at how they have the most beautiful graphics that they're creating for every one of these. They've got these amazing artists that are custom creating every one of these things. I mean, that's amazing. That is so much work, and it's deserved, right? I mean, they almost never budge from the first spot, and that's consistently over a year. So I find that pretty interesting. I mean, another thing I did want to point out. I still have it open, just to point out when we talk about engagement, and this is nutty. I mean, I've noticed this the last few days. And so this is Chiliz, which is building a sports, well, I could read it officially here, but they're tokenizing sports teams basically. And you look at what's going on here and it's like, wait a minute, almost 120 million engagements. That's like Bitcoin level engagement right there. And there's 3 huge spikes. Then that would be because they have, I'll just click on one of these tweets that we caught. They are tokenizing FC Barcelona. And when you look at FC Barcelona, they have 32.6 million followers. Safe to say, the overwhelming majority of these people have never invested in crypto, ever. And when you look at them, I mean, that's just one team. They also partnered, Socios, like is their kind of exchange site, but they've partnered with the UFC as well. And there's other teams, I think Juventus is one of them. And we can see that like, you know, here's their top influencers. PSG, I think that they just launched PSG. Even Mati, one of our advisors, became one of their advisors recently this week. Pretty cool. And you look at their influencers.
Is that a 3-month chart?
This is the 3-month chart, yeah. But you look at some of their influencers, and you know, we start to see that, you know, Socios, they're on site. Alex Dreyfus, who's their CEO, I believe, their own account. And we get into Crypto Newton, Crypto Boss. These names come up a lot. Altcoin Buzz. Wow, there we are. We posted a few times. It's pretty cool. So sometimes we come up on our own, which is pretty fun, pretty cool. But if we look at the last day here, there you go. Looks like FC Barcelona. mention them. And so we look
did
at,
they mention anyone
there you
else?
go.
Okay.
So FC
What was that
Barcelona
first one?
mentioned their tweet.
Nice.
What's that?
Was that other one on the right? Okay. So there's been a couple posts.
Whoops. I clicked out the wrong one. Hang on, let me just get back here. Yeah. So if I go, I'll go back here. Sorry, do you want to see the one day again?
No, I just wanted to see like what the actual content was from the post that Barcelona made and how they're starting to kind of talk about the project.
So this is their Spanish handle, and they're saying they just tagged everything, or bars coming. So they're using that hashtag to track it, and they're tagging Chiliz. The hashtag is there. The Barcelona token is there as well. And then we have this is the same account. So, if you look at some of this, like this is one of many accounts that FC Barcelona has. And this one has 15.1 million followers. So this isn't even the main account that's sharing it yet. And so you start to look at, this level of awareness on a project is just like, it's massive. It's to the level of Bitcoin or greater. I mean, when you think of all of these eyeballs that have never been in crypto at all, it's a sort of, I'd almost call it like an awareness on-ramp of what could happen here. And you got lots of people into sports, you got lots of people talking about these tokens, and they start to discover the others. They start to discover Bitcoin, they start to discover exchanges. They all start talking about it. So it's a really great upward spiral. It's really exciting.
I think it's kind of like what we talked about before with, a really good project and a really good utility. You're almost not even going to know that it's powered by a really good blockchain. You're just the experience is going to be so good, and it's just going to work in a way that apps couldn't work before. And so that's how mainstream adoption happens, is, someone's, whether or not they're placing a bet or a wager, at the stadium there, or if they're buying some merch, or if they have some sort of, memorialized jersey that they've got, and it's all, bound together by Chiliz and by, the platform. It's a nice fit, I think, because it's not, I think the gambling, we wrote that article, and Brandon wrote that article, a couple months ago, but it was like, gambling is a great fit, but also gambling is not, it's mainstream, but it's not, it's not talked about in the mainstream as much. So I think, by kind of fitting this in, here's a way for a ton of people to learn about how this all works and find kind of a better place for it. So, I think it's in a really good spot for a lot of mainstream people, especially, in Europe. Like, I feel like in the US here, we kind of got left behind a little bit on some of this stuff, and it's somewhat regulation. I know they want to protect people. You have to protect the consumer. Some people, I think, took the ICO and went a little out of hand in 2017, to say the least. But you still want innovation. You still want people building cool things, and you have to, if you're going to regulate, let's figure it out. And I think people like Blockstack have started to figure some of that stuff out, but it's got to be easier, or they're just going to keep, Europe's just going to keep kicking our ass in this.
I mean, even if you just look at, like, I think of things like sports, right? And I think, like, I had season tickets to the LAFC, and it was so ridiculous. Like I'd be setting up accounts with Ticketmaster, and then to like resell my tickets if I couldn't make it to a game, it was another disaster. This auction process that was like, and then they ended up taking 20% of the fees when you'd sell your seats. And I had good seats. It was a bummer. And then you're like, you're paying for parking separately, and then you're buying your shirt and your hat and your like everything that relates to the team separately, drinks, food, everything, attending events. And it was like, wait a minute, we're not even at the level of esports yet. And then, like, what happens when this team starts to move into esports, and it's like another separate payment. And everything about a sports team could be tokenized when you think about it. And it's the biggest piece here is, I mean, there's two things that really stick out. One is counterfeit merchandise. That's a huge problem. Like how many people in SoCal have you seen wearing fake FC Barcelona gear, right? We're halfway across the world, and there's probably more fake gear here than official gear by a long shot. You go to any town in Europe, all their football clubs, people are wearing fake gear all over the place. So there's no, and some of it looks real, but it's like there's no real mainstream solid way that at least I've seen yet that, basically verifies everything and works with your tickets in the stadium and knows your seats and all of that, and also bridges into esports. Because if I might like to wear Ronaldo's shirt, his jersey, but then like if I'm a fan at the stadium, what else can it give me about Ronaldo while I'm there? Like this is really interesting. Like when you think about it, and then I could go home and play a video game and choose Ronaldo, and it's all connected, and it all knows it's what I care about. It doesn't even need to know it's me. It just needs to know that, man, this person likes Ronaldo, and so I find it real fascinating what could happen here.
Yeah, and it's ownership too. I mean, you own that seat. You're starting to own that package, and that package that you potentially are growing becomes a bigger asset, right? And if there's memorabilia, maybe potentially attached to your season tickets and everything else that becomes part of that, that's a huge transfer of value that you can make if it was tokenized and together in one spot versus, what is the value of that thing, right? And why shouldn't your seats and maybe some value adds on top of that be worth more?
And the transfer of it, like there's loyalty, like keep me around. Like, I don't want to extend my season tickets because the experience really wasn't that great. Loved the games, but everything else kind of sucked. Like, wouldn't it be great that these things are much more liquid and transferable as opposed to going through this centralized third party of Ticketmaster or StubHub or any of these things? And there's just so much like value lost in that transfer. And there's no loyalty. It's just like, it's like a swap meet of selling tickets and things. There isn't really a good experience there. Oh. So I don't know. Big opportunity.
Yeah, I think this is a good place to stop. Let's thank everyone that joined, even our last viewer. We appreciate that. And we'll post this to our Twitter. You guys can hop on, and we'll try to kind of hop on, maybe once or twice a day or a couple times a week and give you guys updates on what we're seeing. So really appreciate it. All right, my man.
Cool.